Welcome back to Evolve. Today we have the honor of speaking with Mr. Julian Treasure, an acclaimed author and TED speaker with over 160 million views on his 5 TED Talks. He equips leaders and organizations to master conscious listening and speaking, and his work transforms communication breakdowns into connection, productivity, and profit, tackling the $10 trillion cost of miscommunication worldwide. So truly is an honor, Mr. Treasure. Thank you so much for your time today.
I'm delighted to be here. Thank you for asking me.
Excellent. So let's dive in. I remember watching that initial TED Talk at uni, so around 10 years ago, how to speak so that people want to listen. But I know that the world has changed so much since then. COVID, advancements in technology, a kind of social awkwardness that as Brits we already kind of have, but now it's another level across the world. So I really just want to hear from you. No limits. How can we adapt in today's age? What's changed? Maybe we can start with what's changed and then move on into how we can adapt and optimize communication in 2025 and beyond.
Well, let me start with a bit of historical perspective, because I think it's quite interesting if you consider the modern era in the context of the history of our species. So we've been around until recently, I would have said 300,000 years, and there's just been a recent skull discovery that might push that back another couple of 100,000 years. That's Homo sapiens on this planet. And then probably 3 million years of hominid evolution before that in the 4.3 billion year history of our planet. So it's relatively recent. And if you put the planet on a clock, we've only been here for about 2 minutes. But nevertheless, 300,000 years is a significant amount of time where, if you'd gone back 200,000 years, you'd be encountering people who are pretty much like us. And 150,000 years, they'd be using language. Before that, it was primarily non-verbal but vocal communication. I don't know if you've read the lovely book, The Singing Neanderthals by Stephen Mython, an excellent book, which I think probably is very true. It's impossible to conceive of the world being absolutely silent when people were together. They would have made noises. They would have maybe sung, hummed, chanted, and there would have been a lot of non-verbal communication. Whatever it is, grunts, little noises, the kind of things we still use with our intonation and prosody, except we now have the overlay of sophisticated language, which came along about halfway through our evolution. And we've been using that ever since. And for almost the entirety of human history, of that period of human history of 150,000 years, all our knowledge and all our communication has taken place by speaking and listening. Writing was only invented 5,000 years ago. It's very recent. And really, it was the province of the elites until only maybe 200 or 300 years ago, when we had mass education and almost everybody in most societies learned to read and write. And for some reason, reading and writing has come up on the rails and overtaken speaking and listening as what we teach in school. It's a scandal if a child leaves school unable to read and write. But we don't even teach children how to speak or to listen at all, pretty much in most cases. I mean, in America, they do a bit of public speaking training, but in the UK, in my country, almost none at all. And listening is completely forgotten. It's not even acknowledged as a skill. It's confused and conflated a lot of the time with hearing, which is automatic. So most people, sadly, in the world think, yeah, of course I listen. I listen all the time. No, you don't. You're hearing, but that is not the same thing as listening, which is a skill, not a capability. And so what's happened in the 5,000 years since we invented originally writing, and then much more powerfully this last century, ways of recording sound and video. Now, the premium on careful listening has disappeared. I'll check it later. It'll be on YouTube. There's always a way to check stuff later. So you don't have to pay attention. Once upon a time, as you sat at the feet of your guru, if you missed it, you missed it. And there was a premium on careful listening. Pythagoras in ancient Greece used to erect a screen in front of the teacher so that his first-year students, who are called akous matikoi, interestingly, couldn't see the teacher, on the basis that seeing the teacher was distracting from the real business of learning, which is listening to the teacher. Now, they did have writing, and he still believed that. And for a long time, listening was incredibly important in education. It was part of the triumvirate of skills that were taught right through to the Middle Ages and even the Renaissance, because of the concept that harmony in the universe expressed itself in music. Music was a kind of pale reflection of the beautiful harmony of the universe, and that harmony was health and well-being and what we all aim for. So listening to music, listening to beautiful sound around you became incredibly important, and still was considered incredibly important. But that's disappeared. So in the modern world, we are incredibly ocular. We design the spaces we live in for how they look, not how they sound. And actually, the TED Talk I gave before, the one you referenced, was the fifth in a series of 5 TED Talks I gave in successive years. And the one before that is called Why Architects Need to Design with Their Ears. And it was a plea to architects to start listening to the spaces they create, because many of them are not fit for purpose. They sound terrible. So we have moved away from this sensitivity, which for a long time was about survival. You know, if you were going into a cave 100,000 years ago in the evening, you'd better be listening, because there might be something else in there. And it was the way we knew, the way we kept ourselves alive. I mean, for 2 very good reasons. Firstly, you can hear what's behind you. Not very good at seeing what's behind me. I don't know about you. And second, you can hear in the dark. And we spend half our lives in the dark. I mean, until the invention of electric light only 100 and something years ago, darkness was very common, or gloom. And we spent a lot of our time in that. And a lot of the world, even in daytime, in deep forest, jungle, and so forth, it's very gloomy. So hearing is incredibly important. That's why there's not a vertebrate on this planet that doesn't sense sound. There are quite a few that don't see, but none that don't listen for safety. And again, we've lost contact with that. When I see somebody in cities cycling with headphones on, I think, wow, we really lost contact with that critical survival sense. So what's happened is that we've turned our back on a primal, incredibly important sense, which was the bedrock of our relationships and communication, and I would argue still is, actually. And yet we've become obsessed with looking. And so we are now addicted to screens. We look at everything on screens. We've always got something in our hand. We are reading rather than and watching video rather than speaking and listening in person to our friends. And the result of this is clear from a lot of research, particularly younger people of your generation and younger are finding it uncomfortable to speak and listen. They'd rather text. They're finding it difficult to be in situations where they have to, for example, job interviews, where they have to express themselves confidently and appropriately. Don't have the practice. They're much, much more familiar with text and instant messaging and video communication, arm's length communication rather than face-to-face in-person, visceral communication. Now, video conferencing obviously has helped with this a little bit. It's become the norm. COVID did that, and we're never going back to where we were before. So we have become more used to seeing people on screens, but again, it's arm's length. There's a disconnection here. I can't see as well as I could if we were sitting face to face. I can't see the kind of tiny little tells, the indications, the body language, pheromones, whatever it might be, that are involved in face-to-face communication, speaking and listening. So we have a world which is getting disconnected and distracted, particularly with social media. There are some very big organizations spending billions on seizing your attention and mine. That's what they want. That's the currency of their business success. It's what they sell. And so we have a huge swathe of the world who are going through life in a kind of almost a coma of distraction and disconnection. And the result is devastating. I'll give you two aspects of that. One, for well-being, mental well-being primarily. The numbers are becoming quite frightening. For younger people in particular, we have skyrocketing rates of depression, disconnection, loneliness, anxiety, and suicide. And that's deeply concerning. And I think that's got a great deal to do with this disconnection of relationships, this distancing. And in business, you mentioned at the beginning that big number, 10 trillion. That's the combined cost, and it's at least that, of two things: disengagement and miscommunication. And it's validated by research, some very big studies which have been done recently, which find that, for example, in America alone, the cost of miscommunication is a day a week per person. It's a day a week of, could you repeat that? Didn't quite get that. Or making a mistake because of misunderstandings, arguments, conflict, whatever it may be. The whole mass of miscommunication is a day a week. And if you add that up to the US economy, that's $1.2 trillion a year in the US alone. Disengagement is a much bigger study globally, which shows that the cost of employees checking out, just not feeling, this is not really what I want to do. I'm not working as hard as I could because I don't really feel this is for me. And nobody listens to me. What's the point of trying to put my ideas in here? It's bad leadership, fundamentally. And the cost of that is $8 trillion a year globally. So this is all about leaders, particularly, not listening, but generally society not listening. And then, I'll give you one other dimension of this, which deeply concerns me, and that's, of course, politics. So we have a rampant rise of populism around the world. And why? Because people don't feel listened to, and they're angry. And they're voting for somebody who says, I'm going to listen to you, I'm different. All they want is different. And so we have these very kind of black and white cartoon cutout politicians who promise to listen, but they may or may not. And then, unfortunately, we're becoming so polarized that they surround themselves with cliques of people who agree with them. And that's a very fragile form of leadership, of course. If you surround yourself with people who all like you and agree with you, you're not getting challenged, you're not getting alternative perspectives or views. That's incredibly flaky and fragile. So it's the same thing. We have very polarized, fragile leadership with one dimension to it, happening all over the world, unfortunately. And this is all, again, about not listening. It's come out of not listening, and it's promoting not listening. And we have this epidemic of being right, making people wrong, pointing the finger, judging. And this is polarizing our societies in deeply disturbing ways. So there you are. There are three aspects or three results of this journey that we've taken away from our traditional important sense of, skill of listening towards reading, writing, screens and disconnection. And the results for families and young people particularly, the results for business and the results for politics and society generally are disastrous.
Yeah, thank you very much for outlining all of that. It is quite unsettling, to say the least, right? But I want to know, what then can we do in this current situation where we do feel so distant? Especially, you mentioned young people. I've got younger family members who are, in the algorithms. They live on the shorts feeds, and it is hard to cut through sometimes to get them to get through to them. So what can we actually do then to snap them out of this this loop of feeling so uncomfortable? What's the first step for us?
Well, for society, I think it's a very simple transformative thing. We start to teach children how to listen in school, put it on the curriculum. Now, there are signs of this happening. In the UK, there's been a small push towards this, where people are starting to talk about the idea of teaching these soft skills, as they're known. But we haven't moved very far, and it takes a lot of time to turn a curriculum round. They're a bit like oil tankers, They're people will say, "Well, there's no room. We're teaching all the other stuff." Of course, what we fundamentally need is a complete overhaul of the curriculum, because the world is moving so fast. You've probably seen Ken Robinson's #1 TED Talk of all time, where he basically, correctly in my view, says that we are teaching children all the wrong things that probably are going to be completely useless to them when they grow up. We need to be teaching them creativity, problem solving, and, in my opinion, also, most important of all, listening and connecting. But we're not. So we could transform the world in one generation by starting to teach our children how to listen. And if anybody, that's a big job to get that into curriculums. But of course, as parents, we can start doing it now. So anybody who's watching this, who's got children, start teaching your children to listen. That's the best gift you can give them. And the best way to do that, of course, is to listen to them. Go down to their level. Don't talk towering down to a 4-year-old. Kneel down or lift them up, put them on your knee, eye to eye, and give them your full, undivided attention. Scott Peck said you cannot truly listen to another person and do anything else at the same time. Now, that's one form of listening, and we can talk in a moment about what I call listening positions. There are many different ways to listen to people, which I call listening positions, and that kind of full-on, highly attentive, focused listening is one form. We can't do that all the time, of course. I mean, Scott Peck's right. But truly listen, I think it's a little bit misleading, because we can listen to people in appropriate ways without being that focused, depending on what the context and the content are. If somebody's telling you a joke, you could be sending a text at the same time and half listening to them. That's entirely fine. But not if somebody's pouring their heart out to you, or it's really important, or you want to make a soul connection with somebody, or give them that moment of huge respect and humility where you're saying, you're more important than I am. And, some of the great listeners of the world can do that in a very short period of time, just a few seconds, even if it's, whatever you think of Bill Clinton, he had a reputation for being an unbelievable listener. And he would make, even when he was meeting people in a long line, where that thing, the Queen, "Oh, what do you do?" The kind of very formulaic, ritualistic greeting to people. But these people, if they're very good, and the Queen was as well, they make the recipient feel that they are the only important person in the world at that moment, even for 30 seconds. That's a tremendous gift to give to somebody. It's an affirmation of their relevance and value in the world. And not listening to them, of course, is the opposite. So when somebody is really trying to talk to you, if you're a leader and you're busy and you're sending an email and frowning, yeah, no, I'm listening. No, you're not. And that's dismissive. That's saying to the other person, you're less important than what I'm doing right now. And there's a lot of that in the world, unfortunately. So teach your children how to listen. Even if the education system won't do it, we can all do that. And that is a great gift to give to them. And then, of course, yes, it does need to get institutionalized. And I do a lot of speaking for example, to architects. I mean, I'm doing another one, a couple in a few weeks' time, to 1,000 architects in America, persuading them that how the spaces they design sound is just as important as how they look. And that they are influencing the well-being, productivity, and happiness of millions of people in unfortunately, historically, in very bad ways, by designing spaces which are noisy, reverberant, uncomfortable, and unhealthy to be in. Classrooms where children can't hear, offices where people are dramatically less productive and unhealthy again. Because, I don't know how much you go into sound on this podcast, but we now know from large amounts of research that even a level of 65 decibels, which is not deafening, it's noisy. I would have to raise my voice to be heard in 65 decibels, but I wouldn't be bellowing at the top of my voice. It's the average noise level in German classrooms, to give you an idea. Now with group work, and probably the average noise level in classrooms, many, many, many countries around the world. Living and working in that environment for a long period of time increases your risk of heart attack substantially. So we may well have a situation, and in fact we almost certainly do have a situation, where teachers are shortening their lives by working in that environment day after day after day, when they have to go in and shout over the top of a noisy class. We've had many, many teachers lose their voice and sue for that in the UK and in other countries. So that's become a kind of occupational hazard of teaching, this kind of long-term vocal damage because they have to shout so much. So that's about architecture. We don't have to make classrooms that reverberant. We can create classrooms, and if you want a benchmark on this, for a meeting room in an office or for a classroom, anywhere where speech intelligibility is very, very important, then your reverberation time should be less than half a second. Now, you can check that very easily without any technical equipment. Obviously, you can get an acoustician to come in and check and pay them for that, and they can sort out the problem if it's bad. But all you have to do is clap your hands in the space and count how long it takes for the echo of that to die away in the space unoccupied. Now, in a cathedral, if you do that, it's a long, long decay, and it can be 8 seconds, 9 seconds, 10 seconds even. You wouldn't want to have a rock concert in an auditory environment like that. So it's all about appropriateness. But for plain song, it's very nice. In a classroom or a meeting room, half a second max. In an office, it should be a second or thereabouts. And there are so many offices. I'm sure you've been into some in the past. I've been into consult to, trendy agencies. I walk in and there's a stone floor. The brick walls are exposed and painted. One entire wall of the office is glass windows. The ceiling, they've taken all the ceiling panels out because it's cool to have an exposed ceiling, so it's all concrete. There's nothing at all in that space that's going to soak up any sound. It's all going to bounce back into the space. And I end up saying to them, look, you're going to have to tell people what shoes they can wear in this office, because anybody with, clacky heels is going to drive everybody berserk. And then they do things like they'll go and put a little barista station into that space. So you have a barista banging and all that kind of thing going on. At the same time, you can't work in that kind of space. You can just about collaborate, but concentrated working, solo working, I don't think so. And we all know that feeling. Shut up, I'm trying to think here, because we're programmed to decode language. After 150,000 years of development, we are unable not to hear it. Even if it's another language, and you hear the intonation and the prosody. But if it's your language and somebody behind you is talking, it's really difficult to block that out. And we have bandwidth for only 1.6 human conversations, according to the research I've been able to put together. And that makes sense to me, because I'm sure you can't. I can't understand two people talking at the same time. Nobody can. I don't know anybody who can. So when somebody's talking behind you, that's taking up one of your 1.6, and it reduces your ability to think clearly and listen to the little voice in your head that's helping you when you're trying to read, write, calculate, think, whatever it may be. And that is reducing the productivity of people in open plan offices by up to 2/3, according to the research. So that's a devastating loss of productivity worldwide. I mean, compared to that 10 trillion I said earlier, I should imagine that's way bigger than that if you apply that across the billions of square feet of open plan office space that we've decided is the right way to organize every office, driven, of course, by finance people, because you can pack a lot more people into an open plan office than you could if you gave everybody their own space. So it may look more productive and cost effective, but of course, when you factor in the productivity loss, probably it's worse.
Wow, that's the first time I've ever actually considered the relationship between well-being and sound as well, because I've focused so much in reading books and watching content that it's about the impactful communication, but not actually how sound can affect our well-being. And I think that after working in offices in the past, you've made me very self-reflective to why I mean, I've always had like sensitive ears, but if I hear when I was in an environment where there would be a lot of talking or distractions, I would always, I felt rude to do so, but I would go and take my laptop out and just find somewhere else outside.
Makes
But
sense.
based on your description now, it kind of makes sense because the compound people are already stressed without the sound aspect, right? They got deadlines and whatnot. So then it's, I guess, a hidden one because you can't see it. People don't necessarily take it into consideration. That's it's fascinating. And I mean, the one thing I wanted to pick you up on that you mentioned to go back to kind of the social media aspect of this, because I don't think it's just young people, but we're all, most of us now consuming various different types of content constantly. Our attention spans, I don't know the stats on this, but I've heard a lot that they're decreasing. Do you
Mm.
think this is linked to it as well? How do we combat um, being like information overload, decreasing attention spans? What's the link there with all of this?
It's definitely involved. You're right. I had an interesting experience yesterday with my 10-year-old daughter, Holly. I said to her, look, I want to share something with you and see how you like it. It's one of the greatest albums ever made, Dark Side of the Moon by Pink Floyd. It's 40 minutes long. Will you sit and listen to it? The look of horror on her face at the idea of doing something for 40 minutes, which didn't involve any phones, distractions, jumping around, whatever it was, just sitting and listening for 40 minutes was a horrifying prospect to her. We finally did it, and she really enjoyed it at the end. So that's one of the ways I'm attempting to teach my children how to listen, because that was my upbringing, sitting in semi-darkened rooms with headphones on, listening to albums where you had to get up at half time and turn the thing over on the turntable. And it was the album in the order the artist presented it to you. So it's curated for you, not a playlist of tracks and jumping through it. Oh, that one's no good. Just move on, move on, move on. So the way we're breaking content, I hate that word, but whether it's music or video or speech, whatever it is, the way we're breaking creative work, particularly down into smaller and smaller chunks, is feeding into an obsessive acceleration where giving our attention for more than a few seconds is kind of challenging for a lot of people now. And you can see that this accelerating with this, dramatically awful phenomenon of reels, where, your 30 seconds of endless nonsense, which are beguiling, very tempting. Oh, let's see what happens in that one. But, you can do that for an hour, and then what have you got at the end of it? Absolutely nothing. It's like the worst form of junk food. It doesn't fill you up. It doesn't give you any nutrition. It doesn't help you to grow as a person or to learn or to become better at anything. It's simply distraction. And of course, the corollary of it is you're giving your attention to the platform, which is then selling it to other people in advertising and so on. And so it goes. So yes, there's no doubt that attention spans are shortening. I mean, I did a video a while back debunking that very common misconception that people put across about that 93% of all communication is nonverbal, which is nonsense. It's an abuse of a piece of research which was very
Okay.
restricted in its original, and that video is on my LinkedIn if anybody's interested. It's absolute nonsense. I mean, try watching a TED Talk with the sound turned off if you think 93% of all communication is nonverbal. It's not. But there's another one, which was that humanity now has the attention span of a goldfish. And that was, again, a perversion, a complete misreading of a piece of research. And it's attributed to Microsoft, who had nothing to do with it, actually. So don't believe that one. It's not a goldfish. And I don't know what the goldfish's attention span is anyway. I don't think anybody does. But it is definitely shortening. So there are lots of bits of research showing that, for example, the average amount of time that we will be on a web page before we move on, we do know that is getting shorter and shorter and shorter. And, I was speaking to the musician Stephen Wilson a while back, and as he says, with songs now, you have to have the hook in the first 30 seconds of a song because otherwise people move on. The old days where you could have a long introduction to a song and then get into it, gone. People are becoming increasingly impatient. And that is an issue. Because again, listening takes time. I talk about the 4 C's of effective listening. And the first C is consciousness. That is to say, being conscious that you're doing something. It's work. It's an activity. It's not passive. It's not automatic. It takes effort. It takes something to do it. It's a skill that you're exercising. So that's the first thing. And then you can be conscious of, am I listening in the best way I could be listening at the moment? The second C is commitment, which is trying to listen, aiming to listen, intending to listen, making that effort. So it's one thing to be conscious that it's a skill. It's another thing to put everything down from time to time and give somebody that gift of your attention, or to be committed to it, listening in the right way. And committed to listening, it's a wonderful commitment to make in life, to be a good listener. The third C is compassion. It is listening to understand the other person, not to judge them, but to understand them. And the fourth C is curiosity. Seeing everybody as an opportunity to learn something. You can always learn something. I mean, it might be that you're learning how not to do something, or what a disaster it is to be like that person. Sometimes that's the case, but you can always learn something. And stepping away from the arrogance of dismissing people, especially people with whom we disagree. There was that lovely quote by Barack Obama. He said, "I will listen to you, especially if we disagree." That's a willingness to entertain challenge and different perspectives, which is broadly disappearing from the world. And it's one of our biggest problems because it leads to more and more extreme views and more fragmentation of society. And it's a danger to democracy, of course, because, democracy relies, if there's 51 of you and 49 of me, and I really disagree with you, I've still got to live by your rules because that's the way it works. Well, if I won't do that, and we're seeing that increasingly in societies, if I disagree with the 51 or more, then, violence, protest, anger, it is a very dangerous, slippery slope to be on, this slope of disconnection, judgmentalism, making people wrong and so forth. So, yes. And going back just for a moment from the skill of listening, you picked up on the power of sound, which is very much what my book, Sound Effects, is all about. And that's the reason for the title, Sound Effects with an A. Sound affects us. And of course, we make a lot of sound, and that is affecting the planet in very, very serious ways. We're doing immense damage to many other organisms and living things on this planet with our noise. We're a noisy bunch. And the problem is scale. There's 8 billion. It didn't matter when there was a few 100,000 people on the planet. We were a pinprick, and the planet was perfectly fine, and so was everybody else, all the other creatures. But now, 8 billion of us, half of us living in cities, losing contact with the important sounds that have been around us for a long time: wind, water, birds, the sounds of nature, which again we now know from research are very good for us. if you want to improve your well-being, it's a very good idea to get recorded nature sound and deploy it in your house, your office. I can give you there's a great website called, which is called mynoise.net, run by a lovely man called Stéphane Pigeon. I don't get any commission for this. It's a beautiful place to go, and it's a small subscription, and you get access to some gorgeous sound that you can play on your laptop, your phone, wherever. And if you want to do it at scale in a big office, if there's anybody running big companies listening to this, check out moodsonic.com. And that's generative, which means to say it's not recorded, it's created in real time by computer, biophilic, nature-based sound, which I was involved in launching a few years ago. I don't have anything to do with it now, but it's a great company with some wonderful products which can really and are proven now to improve productivity and well-being at the same time in offices by masking unwanted noise and creating lovely soundscapes that make people happier and healthier. So sound affects us profoundly in 4 ways, actually. First, physiologically, because it changes our heart rate, brain waves, breathing, hormone secretions, all sorts of physiological impacts. Any sudden noise will give you a fight-flight reflex. When a car backfires behind you, by the time your cortex has caught up and gone, oh, that was a car backfiring, I'm not in danger, you've had the fight-flight reflex. You've flooded with cortisol, noradrenaline. You're ready to do something about it. So sound is doing that to us all the time. Pleasant sound or unpleasant sound, it's changing all of our physiological rhythms, and we can get entrained. If I drop you in a nightclub with pounding dance music at 120 beats a minute at 130 decibels, your heart rate will not stay the same, I can promise you. So that's the first way. The second way is psychologically, emotionally. Just think of music. I'm sure there's a song you can think of, Hakeem, which will make you happy as soon as you put it on. One that'll make you sad as soon as you put it on. So our emotions are affected by sound, not just music, of course. I mean, I've deployed birdsong all over the place in my 20 years that I spent doing audio branding, asking companies, how does your brand sound, and helping them to make effective sound in spaces. We used to deploy birdsong a great deal because birdsong makes people feel reassured, secure. We've learned over a long period that when the birds are happily singing, things are normally good, not dangerous. When they all fall silent, that's when you want to be worried. There's a lot of research about this. When predators are around or when there's a tsunami coming, everything goes very quiet. So birdsong is reassuring. It's also nature's alarm clock, of course. Time to be awake when the birds are singing. So it is a brilliant sound to work to. You talked about very wisely taking responsibility for the sound that you consume and leaving noisy spaces with your laptop. Well, the other thing you can do, of course, is put headphones on. But a lot of people make the mistake of then playing music, which is just as distracting as the irritating noise of other people's conversation, because music is made to be listened to, and it takes up a chunk of your cognitive bandwidth. Birdsong, on the other hand, it's been here a lot longer than we have, and it's a sound which is very easy to set aside, but it does a great job of masking unwanted sound. So it makes you mentally alert, physically relaxed. It's a beautiful sound to work to. The third way, cognitive, we've talked about that. Noise reducing productivity by up to 2/3 in open plan offices, not being able to think when there's noise around you. And the fourth is behaviorally. Sound changes what we do. Noise particularly is associated with violence. Anger isn't quiet. War isn't quiet. Fighting isn't quiet. So there's a strong association of loud noise with violence or aggression. At the same time, it can even change what we choose to buy. There's a beautiful study that was done by some academics where they had 2 identical displays in a supermarket of wine, French wine, German wine. And all they did was to alternate some music. They played French music day 1, German music on day 2, and they kept that going for months and looked at the sales. And on the French music days, French wine outsold German wine by 5 bottles to 1, which may not be too surprising. It does sell more in the world. But on the German music days, German wine outsold French wine by 2 bottles to 1. Now, that is a massive shift in people's behavior. Almost nobody had noticed the music. So this is not, German music, they're frightened by German. No, no, no. This is an unconscious response to a not noticed sound condition. That is how much sound is changing your behavior and mine all the time. So I think we need to be listening more carefully, don't you?
Indeed, and it's a bit scary when you think about how the unconscious, the power people have over us with sound. But great to be increasingly aware of these actionable steps. And I mean, so many things you mentioned there I'd like to ask you about, but just on the British point of like polarization. I mean, one of the things I love about being a Brit is our culture of respectful debate, which I think is one of the best ways to learn, like you said with the Obama quote. So it's a shame that that is, I guess, dwindling, but hopefully conversations like this can inspire people to listen, especially when you disagree with someone, because you're much more likely to learn in that instance. But you've covered a lot now. I feel like we've got a good grounding of the steps we can take to listen to people. But then on the other side of this, as you said, because people are clicking off of websites more quickly, I know as a, sorry to use the word, content creator, that we can see the analytics of some certain videos, people, the retention's higher. So what can then we do as a communicator in terms of as a speaker ourselves? Are there any kind of little hacks or tips that you could recommend that while we're speaking, we can try and keep and retain someone's attention when there's so many things trying to steal it off of us now?
Yes, definitely. Well, of course, the TED Talk that you saw, which you said was the first one, actually is the 5th one I gave. It's the last one. And that's the one that went ballistic. And that's called How to Speak So That People Want to Listen. And it's interesting that that's been seen by 5 times as many people as the 3rd TED Talk I gave, which is about listening. So people are very keen to be heard, not so keen to listen. And that's not an equation that works particularly well. If we want, get a load of people shouting and nobody listening, that's not communication. So whilst I think listening is the bedrock of all communication, if you imagine a triangle, pyramid-shaped triangle, the base of communication is listening, in my opinion. The middle section is speaking, and then the top, if we're talking about verbal communication here, at the top is presentation skills. People is actors or speakers who really train on this in order to be expert. And I've done a lot of that. I've given hundreds and hundreds of talks all over the world. It's what I do for a living. Quite often I do keynote talks, I do workshops. So I do a lot of speaking in public, and I have trained very heavily to do that. Now, not everybody wants to go that far, but you need to go some way down that line. I give talks. Recently, I was in Copenhagen speaking to 2,000 senior managers. And I always say, how many of you use your voice in your work in significant ways to persuade or to communicate? Everybody puts their hand up, of course, because they do media interviews, or they're standing in front of teams to inspire them, or they're selling to prospects or to investors or whatever it may be. So voice, very important. Okay, lovely. So you all do. How many of you have had formal vocal training? About 4. And I just go, what? What is happening? Why? If this is the instrument we all play, which is, that's how I started that TED Talk. I came on stage and I said, the human voice, it's the instrument we all play. Well, it is. And it's an incredible instrument when you think of, just pick your famous, most amazing singer, whether it's, Robert Plant, Aretha Franklin, Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan, whoever it is, whatever genre of music, you just think of people who are unbelievable at using this instrument. Well, we can't all do that, but we can all optimize what we've got. We're given some equipment, and we can make that work as well as it possibly can for us with training. So my advice to anybody who has to speak and wants to hold attention is to get some formal vocal training. And that just means, look on the internet for things like voice coach, drama coach, presentation coach, speaking coach, singing coach even. Any of them will work with you to look at things like projection, breathing, posture, diaphragm control, all these kinds of things, intonation, prosody, which is both intonation and, the stresses and gaps that we use in our speaking. They'll work on all of that to improve your skill as a speaker. So I talk about the vocal toolbox, and that was the heart of that talk about speaking, that there are these tools that most people don't even know they have. And once you open the vocal toolbox and start to play with things like pitch and pace and silence and volume and become conscious of the way you're using these things, prosody, and also, of course, the register. I mean, there are a couple of heinous things which have come in the last 20 years, which I see a lot of people using these days, and which is very sad, such as high-rising terminal, where every sentence is said as if it were a question, even though it's not a question, it's actually a statement. Well, that's a less effective way of speaking, because you're effectively eliding a little question, is that okay? At the end of everything you say. It's querulous, as opposed to speaking, which is the traditional intonation. When you get to the end of a sentence, you go down, full stop. Down means full stop. Not when you get to the end of a sentence, you go down. Is that okay with you? Do you mind? So? That is not a powerful way to speak, and it's a habitual intonation which has come from the west coast of America a lot into a lot of younger people, particularly, who speak like that a great deal of the time. Any repetitive intonation like that is less than fully powerful, in my view. And then the other one is, of course, vocal fry, which has become, again, very unfortunately, extremely common, particularly with younger people. Vocal fry sounds like this. It's a creaky way of speaking. Yeah, I'm really, really, that's great. Wow. And it's a shame not to be using the power of this wonderful instrument we've all been given, just croaking like this, which is supposed to sound sort of insouciant and cool, but actually the research shows that if people speak with vocal fry, they're considered to be less intelligent, less attractive, and less hireable. So don't do that, please. And if you want to check out vocal fry, there's plenty of stuff on YouTube where you can see very funny examples of people over frying, and it's just not a nice noise to listen to. So there's a lot of stuff which has come through, which is becoming a set of obstacles in the way of people communicating effectively. But I think the biggest answer to, and of course I haven't touched on content there, because you've got two things when you're speaking. You've got content, you've got delivery, those two things, and they're both very important. And if you want to get them right, then I would suggest the point I was just coming to is ask the question, what's the listening I'm speaking into? That is a profound question to ask. It arises from the observation that every human being's listening is unique. Very few people understand that. The vast majority of humanity go around thinking everybody listens like I do. So you're speaking to yourself effectively. And that is not effective because other people are not you and they don't listen like you do. And if you're insensitive to that, that's where you're missing the target altogether. But when you become sensitive to this and you ask, what's the listening I'm speaking into? Who is this person or this audience? And where are they right now? Because listening changes over time. You listen in a very different way, first thing in the morning to up just after lunch to, when you're tired, when you're happy, when you're sad, when you're angry. Listening is very different over time, and it's different from person to person and audience to audience. So whenever you're speaking, you're in a dynamic situation which is unique, speaking into this listening of this person at this moment, which is not you. And asking that question is how you can hit the bullseye instead of missing the target altogether. Becoming sensitive to that, asking what's the listening I'm speaking to, just thinking that all the time when you're speaking to people is transformative for communication.
Well, I think again, you're making me very self-reflective, which I think is a key takeaway I've got from this conversation. Is it's kind of looking inward at the ego that we love to speak. Let's focus on, yeah, I want people to think I'm a great speaker. Yeah, listen to me, when the base is listening first, right? Those are the foundations. But it's an uncomfortable thing to admit that the way we speak isn't optimal. But the only way, I mean, we do a lot of content on languages. The only way you can improve sometimes is by making those mistakes and getting feedback. So the point on having a coach and someone, as much as it hurts, telling us actually that's not optimal. I feel like there's no other real way to do it, because we're always going to judge ourselves and have our egos in the way there.
Yes, ego is a
So
big thing. Actually, I mean, that's an important point to make because, of course, ego gets in the way of listening because listening is intensely humble. You're saying at that moment, you're more important than I am. You are the most important thing here, not me. And again, with speaking, if ego is involved, it's not going to work very well. If your objective is to have people think well of you, that becomes quite evident. People can pick up on that. And I always train, I train people a lot. I do coaching of people often who have got a TEDx talk coming up or an important talk coming up, or they just want to become better at speaking or listening. So I do online training, and very often we'll be focusing on the idea of speaking into the listening, of getting the ego out of the way. And when it's about walking on stage, for example, what it is really about is the gift. So there's a beautiful visualization that I teach on this, which is imagine you're giving the best Christmas present in the world to a 6-year-old that you really, really love. And you imagine their little face as they unwrap this thing that you know they're going to absolutely love. And that feeling as you hand the wrapped package, like, oh, look what I've got for you. This is going to be so good. That feeling is the one you want to have when you walk on stage. Because if you haven't got a gift to give, or do what you do, Hakeem, which is, podcasting. If you haven't got a gift to give, what are you doing? There's no reason to be there. If you simply want people to think you're wow and amazing, which unfortunately is the case with a lot of influencer culture now, where we've got this cult of celebrity, that's very shallow. I mean, what's the gift? How are you growing the audience? What are you actually giving them to make them better, happier, healthier in the future? That is the important thing. You're just a vessel. You're carrying the gift. And if you walk on stage with that feeling, that I've got a gift for you, you're really going to like this. It's amazing how you make a more profound connection with an audience and how they appreciate it far more. So it's not about people loving you. It's never about you. It's about the gift you're giving.
what incredible advice. I would definitely want to take that on from now on, because every, I think, person who makes, using the C word again, the content online, there is that dilemma of, okay, I'm interviewing this person, but then how do I look? And then I think that as we've grown with this podcast, is realizing that the value comes from the guest's insight, not from the host itself. And that was something that we've really come to discuss a lot within our team. Whereas when you first start out, you think, "Oh my God, as the host, I need to say this and I give these long accounts." But then they're clicking on the video for the guest, not for the host, right? So yeah, I love that metaphor of the gift there. It's awesome advice.
Which is not to say
Um,
you haven't got a gift to give as well, Hakeem. I mean, I've been on podcasts where I'm being interviewed by somebody who's a genius or a guru in their own way, and it's a conversation where it's not just me talking about my work, but it's also them talking about their work, or the combination of the two. So I wouldn't be
hmm.
reticent. If you've got a gift to give it. But if you're facilitating somebody who's got a gift to give, that's equally a wonderful service to give. Asking the right questions and just listening is marvelous.
No, I appreciate that. And I think the final area that maybe we can bring all of this together now is online communication, as you've mentioned, the video calls, the texts. It's so common nowadays and fundamental in business and also for how we communicate with friends, loved ones. How can we translate this into the online space now of because whether we like it or not, we kind of have to. I mean, we're doing it right now. So are there any final tips in terms of online communication? How can we tie all this into that?
It does take more effort to do this effectively because you're missing a lot of signals. So the richness of what you're receiving is reduced, and that means you have to concentrate harder in order to pick up on all the little signals. If you're an important video conferencing one-to-one situation, now of course, if you're speaking to a team of 20, they're 20 tiny little dots across your screen. You've got no chance at all. Then I think it comes down to etiquette and also some basic rules of this, which can help you to communicate better. The first and most important rule of video communication, which isn't a problem for you or me at the moment, is camera at eye level. I have lost count of the number of even CEOs that I have video conferences with who've got a laptop on the desk in front of them, the screen's tilted back, and the shot is basically up their nose. They're looming over the thing. That's just not a good look. So camera at eye level, even if you have to put a stack of books on the desk in front of you, get that camera, which is normally at the top of your laptop screen, unless you're using a webcam, which we both are, I'm sure, but, camera at eye level. Rule number 2, light from the front. We're both in a studio setting, so that's artificial. I've got lights in here. This is my office. I can return it to an office very quickly. I have a green screen behind me. I have lights. So, it looks professional, but light from the front is critical. Even if I didn't have any of this on, I have a window facing me, which I would open, and that would be daylight washing me from the front. Do not ever do this with light behind you because you get silhouetted and it is really difficult to see what is going on. And it just, again, is a terrible look. Try to avoid daylight as well, if you can, because it's very variable. You can't rely on it. The sun comes out, the sun goes in, nighttime. So you need light. And then think about what's behind you as well. If you're just in a house, if you're not going to have a virtual background, think about what's behind you. There's plenty of virtual backgrounds we can apply now just with the technology without a green screen, of course. So that's just making sure that you're delivering a good image. An external mic is gold dust because most people don't use those. And if they're in a reverberant room, you get a very unpleasant audio experience at the other end. So try to be in a room that's relatively dead acoustically. And if you can, have an external mic, like the one that's sitting in front of you. There are plenty of them out there. And I've got one just here, just above me. So that's a very important thing. If you want to look good and sound good, that's the way to do that. And if you're doing hybrid meetings, try and make sure it's a level playing field. In other words, all the people in the office are also on their computer. So they have the same experience as the people at home. They can see the side chat, they can see all the same things, and don't have the meeting after the meeting in the office. It's not fair on the people who are at home because they don't get to have that. So you just try and make it the same for everybody, then that's fair. Otherwise you end up with 2 classes of meeting going on simultaneously. So those are all very important things. And I would say if you're doing video conferencing on a regular basis, do not schedule back-to-back calls. You need at least 15 minutes in between calls to do the admin, do the follow-ups, decompress, walk away from your desk, get away from the screen, look at different ranges, different colors and lights, and then come back feeling relatively fresh for the next one. If you're doing them back to back, there's an immense amount of fatigue that kicks in. And even with AI note takers, you think, oh, that's all taken care of. There's still going to be actions to take care of and things that you need to do in order to make sure life actually continues running. It's lovely to think that you're doing ever so well by having loads and loads of calls in a day, but if you don't follow them up, that doesn't work very well. I talk about the 4 foundations of powerful speaking in that TED Talk: honesty, authenticity, integrity, and love. And integrity is being your word, is doing what you say, following up. It's very important in potent communication. So, yeah, those are just some thoughts on this mode of communication, which we all have to use, which is now, it's going to be here forever, and it's not going anywhere. So it's important to become good at it and give yourself the best opportunity to be good. Get a webcam, get a mic, set yourself up at home with a little setup, doesn't cost much, which will make you look very professional and give you enormous clarity, which is received by the other end very gratefully, because so many people don't have that. You get people, you can't see them, the light's behind them, you can't hear them properly. And then when I said etiquette, the only other thing I would say is in all video conferencing meetings, cameras on, obligatory. Now, how many meetings have we all been in where half the people have got cameras off and you know that they're doing their email or having a side chat because they probably turned the mic off. Well, we're all on mute, should be on mute anyway in a big meeting. And that is just not effective. If you're going to be in a meeting, be in the meeting. You can't kind of leave a meeting room halfway through to do your email. If it's not an effective meeting, then change the meetings. And we could talk a long time about effective meetings. That's a different conversation altogether, where you have an agreement. And I mean, my biggest tip on that, by the way, which is also transformational to many businesses, is set an end time. Most people will set a meeting, we'll meet at 10. Yet for how long? It's always an hour. Why? We don't need that. We'll meet at 10 for 10 minutes. That's all we need for this. Or we'll meet at 10 for 25 minutes. I think that should be enough. So 10 till 10:25 in your diaries, please. Set an end time, and then you know what you're doing. Otherwise, these meetings just get flabby and completely waste everybody's time. We don't need 1 hour for every meeting. So there you are. Some thoughts on video communication and meetings in general.
It's gold, because I know that now we built the podcast, we're starting to do these things, but that's with hindsight, yeah, it's easy to speak about these things, but if you don't know it, you just don't know it, right? And it is so simple, but the impact is just huge once you do. As you said, use the external mic, you have the lights, and an awareness of that. For most people, I mean, they haven't worked in film before, or lighting and cinematography. How would they know these things, right? But it just makes such a difference once you make those small tweaks. But Mr. Treasure, it's been very, 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 very useful. I feel like, again, if there was no limit to this conversation, I would spend hours and hours. But I do want to ask you, for any, before we mention where we can find you as an audience, any final messages or points we've missed that you'd like to say?
Well, if you're interested in listening better, speaking better, and the power of sound, then that's what this is all about. The Listening Society. It's my new online community and resource for people who have those interests, who want to speak, listen better, and who are interested in sound. It's full of training courses. It's full of audio, video, lots and lots and lots of stuff in there that will be hugely useful. And I'll send you a link, Hakeem, so that you can offer to your listeners, and I offer it to all of you who are listening to this, a month's free membership to try it out. Now, the free membership, you won't be able to access the training courses, which include my 7-hour full training course on speaking and listening skills, but you will be able to access all the rest of the content, and you'll find it, I think, very interesting. And I would welcome you in there. And if you want to communicate with me, jt@juliantreasure.com. If you want to talk about any ways I could help you with coaching, training, workshops, keynotes, anything, then I'm very happy to engage with people. This is my passion in life, is to regenerate the world's listening. And if there's any way I can do that, just let me know. And the website, of course, is juliantreasure.com.
course, we'll have all of the links probably popping up as you say that on screen. And a quick mention as well to Mr. Treasure's books. I think there's three main ones out there at the moment. The new one, Sound Effects, How to Be Heard, Sound Business. We'll put all of those links in the description box below. Excited to dive in and learn more about the Listening Society. So thanks, of course, everything in the description box below. Huge gratitude. Thank you so much, Mr. Treasure, for sharing this gold. Sorry to use the pun. You've probably heard it too many times, but literally, I've learned so much in this conversation. So I'm sure that anyone else listening right now will be taking extreme value from this. And of course, to anyone watching this, please do let us know what you think in the comments. Do you have any tips? Do you disagree with what we've said? Agree? Let us know in the comments below. Please do click the like button if you enjoyed it, and consider subscribing if you took any value from this episode, as it helps us to make and have more conversations like this. But until next time, thank you very much. Huge thanks to Mr. Treasure, and we will see you next time.